Okay, we're live. Okay, some good news. I don't know how many of you have taken the exam yet, but I'm going to give you all a chance to add 5 points to your score. And I'm about to tell you how to do that. On that index card that you have in front of you, write your name. Just in case they get shuffled, put 10 a.m. on it so that I know it's you guys. And then I'm going to ask you a question. And don't speak the answer out loud. You can write it down, then after we're done, we'll pass it up, and then I'll add that 5 points, depending on how your memory treats you. All right, this morning, one of your handouts shows about memory. So this is going to be a memory test. You can see that your memory is divided into 2 parts. You have the short-term memory and the long-term memory. Nowadays, we call it the working memory and the long-term memory. The difference is significant. In the old days, we used to say your working memory was, your short-term memory was information that came to you. You let it roll around your eggshell in your head, and you determine whether it's worthy of memory. Now, my student in the back who used to be over here, you remember, I asked him, when you came in, did you see the 2 people behind you? Yes. He remembered they were female, couldn't remember what clothes they had. That is an example of, he probably knew it for less than 7 seconds, and then he just disregarded it. And then there's long-term memory. Long-term memory, there's 2 parts of that. One of it, if you follow that one down to the right branch, long-term memory, and then it talks about implicit, which is unconscious. So your unconscious memory is working pretty well, but you don't really know because you're not thinking about it. Your unconscious memory is the kind of things that remembers a lot of your atmospheric things. The smell of somebody's perfume in this room, maybe the temperature of this room, and of course you know where you are. You notice under that you have priming, which is subliminal messaging, which means clearly it was not a conscious effort. Name and 10 a.m. please. And then there are procedural memory next to your priming. Procedural memory, how many people here knows how to ride a bicycle? Okay, in 20 years, guess what? If somebody presents you with a bicycle, are you going to be able to ride it? The answer is yes. Why? Because that is a procedural thing, and it involves muscles, and it pretty much becomes an automatic memory, which, like in bike riding, took you a little while to accomplish the little steps that brought you into the capacity to ride a bicycle. All right. Now back to this other side of long-term memory is explicit. You have episodic. Episodic means like episode. It means you were there. How many remember George Washington? Were you there? No. So it's not an episodic memory. It's a semantic memory. If you were there with George Washington crossing the Potomac, then you can say it's an episodic experience, and that's why I put the word experiences. You have to experience it. Okay, so all this is about an introduction to our new mods for these 2 weeks. But now we're going to put it to the test. Okay? I wrote on the board a couple of weeks ago, this states anybody remember doing that? Okay, here's your question. Again, don't say it. Who said that? That's me. I was quoting somebody from a video. So, as I say that, let me take vote 1. Who believes they remember that person's name right now? Answer, no one. Okay? But we're not going to stop there. Because I'm going to give you the context to see if I can reach down into your long-term memory, episodic, because you were here, by giving you context clues. Here's your context clues. The person who said that was talking about sensation and perception. Now, having heard that, does anybody now know who that person was? Más o menos? Okay. Anybody else? So we're not making much progress, but a little progress. This guy was the one who was showing us the colors and the matching and the spinning triangle thing that he had up there, all that stuff. Now, who remembers what that guy looked like? Lots of people remember what he looks like. Now, has anybody begun to remember who he is? Are you more confident?
I'll remember his name.
Okay. You certainly remember the guy. How about this? His name is an odd name. I spoke in this class at least 30 times his name. I mentioned his name while the video was showing, and then afterwards, and days afterwards, when I was talking about things like context and everything, and how can you know anything if your sight, which is the same as your other 4 senses, anything can mean anything based on context. And I kept saying, according to blank, blank, Context is everything. That's why you need to know D. Okay? That help anybody? All right. Did I ever say, or do you remember me ever saying, look, this guy was classic in the field of psychology, so that's pretty important for you to know that. Someone like Ivan Pavlov or Sigmund Freud, who I do say things about that. Anybody remember me saying anything about this guy being really important for you to remember? No. If I had, maybe more of you would be able to remember. Okay? Now, I will tell you this. If you think you know what his name is, but you can't spell it, because it is an odd name, don't worry about it. If you get anywhere close to his first name or last name, you'll get the points. Okay? So, this is an example of a name associated with a video that you saw and different principles like this. And I repeated it no less than 20, maybe 30 times. And I did it all on purpose because I knew today, eventually, we would get to memory and I was going to ask you about it. If I just mentioned it once, it would be no surprise to any of you that you're not going to remember that, because it's not like hearing the word Rubik's Cube and forgetting rubric. You either remember Rubik's Cube or you don't. So I should have brought one of those in here. I bet you if I did, people would identify that by what it is. Why? Because it used to be popular. Maybe you even like playing with it. And it had more of an impact on you than this guy's name. Okay? So, anybody anywhere close to figuring out what his name is? I don't know what else I can tell you. Well, you tell me. Is there anything you think that I could say that would help you remember his name? Hmm? Well, you can write your guess down. I don't want you to say it out loud, but if you get it right, I'll tell you about that. You're thinking if I gave you the first letter of his first name or last name or both? Last name? So right now you're the only one who's lukewarm in the class. Okay? See if this helps you. Last name is L. No. Are you more convinced now? Does that help? Are you like 100% convinced now?
I don't know how to spell it, but
Yeah, okay. You might be the one who wins the $60 million lottery. In this case, it's a 5-point lottery. Anybody getting close? Okay. Anybody else have a guess? It's just these two? Okay. What's the problem here? The problem is I never told you to focus on it. There's really no reason for you to focus on it. You watched this video and you might have remembered this. I bet you all remember about what was the word that I wrote on the board when we were missing words for you to be able to read it. That one you can say out loud. When we were doing, what was it?
Whatever.
Whataburger. So you can remember that because in context, it was an example of how in what you later learned to be Gestalt, that you, and this guy, I'll say his name, this guy said, everything's in context. And we learn, the way we see is by learning to see, right? Remember that? And I said, right, when you start out as a person who doesn't know how to read, you have to know the letters first, and then you go from letters to consonants, and then you go to whole complete words. So when you open a book and you see the word large, you see that as a chunk. Chunk is actually a operationally defined term. Your brain can and likes to break things into chunks because it's easier for you to remember. How many digits in a U.S. telephone, not counting the area code? 7. Scientists, researchers have found that 7 random things, like numbers, you have a pretty good capacity to remember that. You add 3 more, and now you're up to 10, and your memory starts not being able to read that chunk. This you can read, and you can remember it. And when you do read it, you don't read it as you would say it, large. That's not the way you read it. You read it as one chunk, large. That's it. All right. Anybody else want to take a guess or want to write it down? Because if you're not going to write it down, I'm going to collect the ones who did. And oh, here's another thing. There's a possibility you do remember, but you don't think you did. Remember we talked about that subconsciously? So I would suggest you take a guess, because your conscious brain right now might be saying, oh, hell no, I don't remember that guy. I mean, I remember who he is, but I don't remember his name. But if you take a guess, you might actually remember it. I do this all the time, because my memory has always been bad. It's not a product of old age, probably a product of ADHD, because those of us who have ADHD are very impatient and want to move, so we don't wait long enough for that marble to spin around our cranium to come up with a memory. Your brain, where does our memory come from, by the way? How do we get things inside of our brain? This is another memory question, I guess. How do we get anything in our brain? Bottom-up processing. Where does it come from? What's bottom-up processing? Do you feel me? Yeah. Bottom-up processing is one of your 5 senses, right? Which one of your 5 senses has a memory? They all do. All 5 of your senses is the only way you get information inside of your brain, and all 5 of them have a memory. So, I forgot was it you, the green chili enchiladas? See, I don't trust myself. I look at her and I think, I remember there's a person in that corner, and I hope you haven't changed seats. So, the reason I could make her salivate is because she has a memory of green chili enchiladas. By the way, that day, I made sure I had green chili enchiladas that night for dinner. And they were quite good. So, what were the questions I asked her? When was the last time you had it? Where, okay, that's time-wise. And then, where was it? What do you like to drink with it? Who made it? Could you smell it while it was cooking? Yes. Set the stage. All those environmental things can follow the pathway into, now she didn't have any problem remembering green enchiladas. But the more I embellish on the context, the more it strengthens her memory and cranks out the salivary glands. Meanwhile, the rest of you who are just listening to it, who like green chili enchiladas, you begin salivating because you've tasted it, you've liked it, and by me setting the context is enough for you to go there in your memory. Okay, so everybody take a guess on what this person's, how about this? I'll give you one more clue. First name, B, starts with a B. Does that help anybody? Are you still rock solid? Then you got it. You got it? You think you got it? Good man. All right. Well, write down whatever guess. There's no harm to it, but there's 5 points for you if you got it right. Take a guess. I'll start off with you in the back. Okay. Now, maybe that's exactly right. You even spelled it right. See, here's another example. Somebody who does remember it, but not real consciously, but thinks that she's correct, but she don't want to raise her hand. Nobody's going to say anything. Now that she said that, now I'm going to do an example. Another example. So you guys, you guessed yet? Ready? Well, we're trying to think about it. Okay? Of course, you're correct. Excellent! Come on. Perfect! Oh, you're still guessing? We're still thinking? All right, well, time to move on. So either guess now or forever hold your silence. Guess now, by the time I come back to this row, you guys do. Excellent. Close enough. Perfect. Perfect. Vámonos. Did you get two? Or did you give me each? Okay. You can have that if you want. Anybody else that hadn't listed? Bolo. Very odd name. Now, did it help you when I said, hey, you might win the lottery? Did that help you? Did it make your connection?
No.
Okay. Lotto and lottery. Lotto is short for lottery. So that would have been a cue that perhaps would have helped me. All our brains work differently. So let's do something entirely. Let's take a look at 522. It's unlikely anybody's read this because I just put it up recently. So okay, let's look at number 5. Which measure of memory retention assesses the ability to draw information out of storage, which is called retrieval, and into conscious awareness? Which measure of memory? All right, when I ask you the name of Bolotto, those of you who were able to remember, were you rehearsing that? Were you relearning that? Were you recognizing it? Or were you recalling it? All right, let me help you then. When I ask you a question and it's on the study guide, the question is there and the answer is there, correct? A multiple choice. So when you recognize that answer, are you using recall or are you using recognition? Recall. You're recalling it because you learned it once. I'm sorry, you're right, recognition. You're recognizing it because you have it in your brain, and even if you don't remember the spelling of the guy's name or you don't really know the answer right consciously, once you see the answer in front of you, you go, oh, I remember that. I recognize that. That's a recognition memory. If I put 4 names on the board, David Smith, Alexander Hamilton, Dr. George Peacock, and Bolotto, the vast majority of you would have said, oh yeah, now I remember, it's Bolotto. Why? Because that's recognition. You recognize that name in a list of others. So recognition is a lot easier than recall. Recall is pulling it out of your memory with not a lot of clues. And I tried to give you as many clues as I could think of, and it didn't really help that much. That's why I use multiple choice exams, because you've got a lot of questions. You got 4 mods, maybe 60, 70, sometimes 80 questions. Multiply that by 4. You're getting up there in numbers of questions that you're trying to make that a rock solid memory of 240, 300 questions. That's difficult. Fill in the blank. But when you see a question like, who's famous for the experiment with classical conditioning, and now everybody remembers him by the name of his dog? Now, maybe some of you would remember that. Oh, it's got to be Pavlov. Right. That would be a recall. But if you're reading a list of Freud, Skinner, Watson, and Pavlov, you're more likely to get it because when you read that, you have contextual clues, especially when I use the word dog. There's no way you're going to remember Freud's dog or Carl Rogers' dog, Abraham Maslow's dog. You're not going to remember that. If you read it, and I'm sure you did, and you had a handout, you had all this stuff, you would recognize Pavlov. So those are some interesting things about how your memory works. Now, question 6, you should know how to answer that just looking at your memory handout. Seven, probably as well. Nine, you should certainly know, because I just told you the answer to 9. Ten, you should be able to answer. 11, you could probably answer, even though we've never talked about it. But it makes common sense from what we have talked about. 15, I don't think we're ready to answer that one. Encoding, you already know the answer to that because you learned that in sensation and perception. Getting the information from the outside world through one or more of your 5 senses and then making it available to your brain so that it can perceive it. Sensory plus perception. So encoding is in the middle. You can't get to perception unless the stimuli from the outside world has been transduced into information that your brain can accept. Now, 17, we haven't talked about at all, but you could probably answer it because it's like a computer question. Your brain is not like a computer exactly, but there's a lot of things that are. Storage is one of them. You look at something on the computer and you say, oh, I want to save that. Boom. Touch this button, hit that button, save in this file, and you placed it in storage, and it's there forever, unless you forget. '19, we've never talked about that, but by reading that, who thinks they know the answer to that? C, retrieval. Just have to go get it, the way you do it on a computer. It's in this file, go get it. 20. Jeremy can accurately process and store new information. But when he is tested on what he has learned, unfortunately, like all you have to do, he becomes so anxious that he can't easily recall this new information. Jeremy most clearly demonstrates difficulty with what? Retrieving the information. It gets there, it gets into his long-term memory. Now he's asked to retrieve it, and he can't do it. All right? Well, let's see. I guess I'm going to have to turn the taping part off of this if I'm going to show you this video. Even though it's a YouTube video, I'll probably kick it out because it's copyrighted somehow. Well, let's wake up here, guys. Wake up. Okay, for those of you who are watching at home, this is a YouTube video. You can sound exit by looking for memory reconsolidation. Okay, so I'm now going to show you guys. Wow, I don't think I can pause this. That might be a problem. No such thing as pausing a live stream. Well, if that's the case, I'll have to do part 1 and part 2. Because there is no pause. That is not an option. So if I end stream, it'll cut it off. But then I'll just start again. So this is part 1. Come on.